"Sir, are you hurting?" That was the very first thing a tiny little girl said to a man the entire city was afraid of, on a cold, rainy night. His birthday. A mafia boss stood there, powerful, wealthy, and completely alone. No one remembered him. No one dared to come close. No one dared to look him in the eye. Except her. She didn't know who he was. Didn't know how dangerous he could be. But those small eyes saw something no adult ever had. Pain. And then she stepped closer. No fear. No hesitation. Just one innocent question. Powerful enough to crack the heart of a man who had been frozen for 23 years. But what no one could understand was, how did a little girl know he was hurting the very first time she met him? If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet power of kindness, especially when no one else chooses to show it. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Which city and country are you in, and what time is it there right now? It's always amazing to see how stories like this connect people from all over the timeless world. If moments like this remind you of the beauty of humanity, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more powerful stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that can change life. October 15th, 2025. The clock on the dashboard of the black Cadillac Escalade glowed 10:47 p.m. as Vincent Moretti guided the vehicle through the quiet, tree-lined streets of Grosse Pointe Shores just outside Detroit. Rain streaked the tinted windows in slow silver trails, blurring the glow of street lamps into soft halos. The city skyline shimmered faintly in the distance across the Detroit River, tall glass towers and the Renaissance Center's lights like distant stars. But here in this affluent enclave, the world felt sealed off, private, untouchable. Vincent's hands rested lightly on the leather-wrapped steering wheel. He was 38 years old, fair-skinned, with the sharp features of his Italian-American heritage, dark hair, neatly combed back gray eyes that rarely betrayed anything. Tonight those eyes stared straight ahead, unseeing. Today had been his birthday. No one had mentioned it. Not his lieutenants, not his consigliere, not even Sophia, the woman he had been seeing on and off for 2 years, always more arrangement than affection. She had sent a single text at noon. "Need $5,000 for the weekend. Wire it now." That was all. No happy birthday. No pretense. He pulled into the long driveway of his mansion, the automatic gates sliding open with a low hydraulic hum. The house rose before him, modern lines of stone and glass, 3 stories of quiet opulence, floodlights washing the facade in pale white. Inside, weighted marble floors, Italian leather sofas, a wine cellar stocked with bottles worth more than most people's homes. A cleaning service came twice a week. A chef prepared meals he rarely ate. Everything perfect. Everything empty. Vincent killed the engine and sat in the sudden silence. The rain tapped insistently on the roof. He felt it then, the familiar weight pressing against his ribs heavier tonight. Loneliness wasn't supposed to touch a man like him. He controlled waste management contracts across 3 counties, legitimate fronts that moved millions, while quieter operations ensured loyalty and protection in the shadows. Rivals feared him. Associates respected him. Yet here he was, 38, staring at his own reflection in the rearview mirror, seeing only the boy who had once watched his little sister bleed out on cracked sidewalk after a stray bullet found her during a turf dispute, 23 years earlier. That day he had sworn never to let anyone close enough to become a target, never to feel that helpless rage again. He exhaled slowly, the breath fogging the glass. Guilt gnawed at the edges of his mind, not sharp but constant, like a toothache that never quite went away. He had built walls of money, power, silence. They kept the world out. They also kept everything else out. No family, no warmth, just this vast, echoing house and the knowledge that if he disappeared tomorrow, the empire would continue without missing a beat. The thought brought a bitter twist to his mouth. Vincent stepped out into the drizzle. Cold droplets struck his face, soaked the shoulders of his charcoal wool overcoat. He didn't bother with an umbrella. The front door opened with a soft beep as he entered the security code. The foyer light came on automatically, crystal chandelier casting prisms across polished travertine. He shrugged off the coat, hung it on the brass rack, and paused. The house was too quiet. No hum of television, no distant music. Just the rain against the tall windows. He walked into the great room. Floor-to-ceiling glass overlooked a manicured lawn sloping toward the lake. A gas fireplace flickered behind tempered glass flames, dancing without heat. On the bar cart sat an unopened bottle of Macallan 18-year-old single malt, his usual nightcap. He poured 2 fingers into a heavy crystal tumbler, the amber liquid catching the firelight. He didn't drink. He simply held the glass, staring into it as though answers might rise from the depths. Memories surfaced unbidden. His sister's laugh, high and bright, before everything shattered. The way she used to tug his sleeve and beg for piggyback rides. the blood on his hands when he tried to stop the bleeding. He had been 15, too young to save her, old enough to understand that love made you vulnerable. So he had buried it. Deep, locked it away behind deals, threats, calculated calm. Yet tonight the lock felt rusted, straining. Vincent set the glass down untouched. His phone buzzed once Jason, his right-hand man, texting, "All quiet tonight, boss." No movement from Rossi's crew. Vincent didn't reply. Antonio Rossi had been pushing boundaries lately, trying to muscle into union contracts Vincent had held for a decade. Tension simmered. Street encounters had grown bolder, a car tailing too close on Jefferson Avenue last week, a whispered warning in a downtown bar. Vincent had handled it with cold efficiency, no shots fired, just presence and a few well-placed words. But he knew escalation was coming. He moved to the window hands in his pockets. The lake was black, restless under the rain. He thought of the people out there tonight, ordinary people, families huddled in apartments, children sleeping on couches because rent was late again. He rarely allowed himself to think of them. Empathy was a luxury he couldn't afford. Yet something stirred tonight, a faint ache he couldn't name. Perhaps it was the birthday. Perhaps it was the silence pressing in from every side. A sudden memory hit him walking past a bus stop earlier that week, seeing a young woman with 3 small children soaked from the rain clutching grocery bags that looked too heavy. Her coat was threadbare, her face drawn with exhaustion. One of the children, a little girl no more than 2, had reached up with tiny hands, and the woman had lifted her despite the strain, murmuring soft words Vincent couldn't hear. He had driven past without stopping, but the image lingered. The tenderness in that moment, so simple, so far from his world, had lodged somewhere deep. Vincent turned away from the window. The guilt twisted harder now. Not just for his sister, for all the moments he had chosen power over kindness. For the lives his empire touched indirectly, people squeezed by protection fees disguised as services, families in neighborhoods where his quiet influence kept worse predators at bay, but never truly lifted them up. He had told himself it was necessary. Survival. Yet tonight the justification felt thin, brittle. He walked to the study, flipped on the desk lamp. Papers lay neatly arranged, contracts, ledgers, nothing personal. No photos, no mementos. He sat in the high-backed leather chair and closed his eyes. The inner conflict raged quietly, the man who commanded respect through fear versus the boy who once believed in protecting the weak. The boy had lost, the man had won, but victory tasted like ash. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the glass like impatient fingers. Vincent remained motionless, the tumbler forgotten on the bar. 38 years old, alone, untouched by warmth for so long, he had almost convinced himself he didn't need it. But deep in his chest, something stirred, small, insistent, dangerous. A crack in the armor he had worn for decades. He didn't know what it meant yet, only that it frightened him more than any rival ever could. The night stretched on. The mansion stood silent, waiting. And somewhere in Detroit's colder corners, a woman and her children endured another evening of hunger, cold and quiet, despair, worlds apart, yet on a collision course neither could foresee. October 16th, 2025. The rain had not let up. It fell in steady sheets across Grosse Pointe shores, turning the manicured lawns into dark mirrors and drumming relentlessly against the mansion's wide glass walls. Vincent Moretti had slept little, 3 hours, perhaps 4, restless fragments, interrupted by the same looping image. A young woman lifting a soaked toddler under a bus shelter. Her thin shoulders hunched against the wind. The child's small arms wrapped around her neck, as though the mother were the only solid thing left in the world. He had driven past. He always drove past. Yet the scene refused to fade. He rose before dawn, showered under scalding water that did nothing to warm the chill inside his chest, dressed in a charcoal suit tailored in Milan, and descended the curved staircase. The house smelled faintly of lemon polish, and cedar professional cleaners had come yesterday while he was out. Everything gleamed. Everything was still. He moved through the kitchen sub-zero refrigerator, humming softly, granite counters spotless, and poured black coffee from a stainless steel French press. The first sip burned his tongue. He welcomed the small pain. At 7:43 a.m., the security panel in the foyer chirped once someone at the service entrance. Vincent frowned. The cleaning service wasn't due until Monday. He tapped the screen. Grainy feed showed a woman standing under the narrow overhang hood up against the rain, holding the hand of a little boy, while a toddler girl clung to her leg and 2 older children huddled behind her. All 4 were drenched. The woman's shoulders rose and fell with what looked like labored breathing. Vincent hesitated. Then he pressed the intercom. Yes, a soft voice answered, thin and polite, almost swallowed by the downpour. Mr. Moretti, I'm Renee Washington. From the agency. They said you needed part-time help starting today. I'm sorry we're early. The daycare closed unexpectedly. I couldn't leave them home alone. Vincent stared at the screen. The agency had mentioned a new housekeeper, someone vetted reliable, willing to work odd hours. He hadn't paid attention to the name. Now the woman lifted her head slightly, and even through the grainy camera he saw exhaustion carved into her face, hollow cheeks, shadowed eyes, lips pressed tight against cold. He should have sent them away. Rules were rules. Children did not belong in his house. Yet something, perhaps the echo of last night's ache, made him press the unlock button. The service door clicked open. Renee stepped inside first, guiding the children carefully, so their wet shoes left only faint prints on the marble. She was 29, though she looked older, thin to the point of fragility, 5 feet 4 inches, wearing a faded navy coat, 3 sizes too large, patched at the elbows. Her jeans were worn almost white at the knees. The toddler Aaliyah clung to her calf with both arms, hazel eyes wide and watchful. Jamal, the boy twin, held his mother's hand tightly, thumb in his mouth. Behind them came Malik, 7 shoulders squared like a soldier, dark eyes scanning every corner with suspicion, and Zoe, 6, clutching a soaked stuffed rabbit, her small frame trembling. Renee pulled the hood down. Her hair was braided tightly against her scalp, raindrops still clinging to the strands that had escaped. She met Vincent's gaze for half a second, then dropped her eyes. "I'm so sorry, sir," she said softly. "I know the contract says no children on the property. I tried to find someone last night. There was nobody. I didn't have a choice." Vincent said nothing. He watched her, watched the way she kept one arm curved protectively around the twins even as water pooled at her feet. Watched Malik step slightly in front of Zoe as though he could shield her from whatever threat this stranger might pose. Watched Aaliyah stare up at him, not with fear but with solemn curiosity. The disparity hit him like a physical blow. His house heated floors, museum-quality art on the walls, a commercial-grade espresso machine that cost more than most people's rent. Their clothes damp, mismatched, smelling faintly of mildew and desperation. He had spent over $300,000 last year on security upgrades alone. Renee's coat looked as though it had been fished from a donation bin. Guilt rose sharp and sudden violent tearing. He had built this fortress to keep pain out. Instead, it had kept everything human out. And here was proof of what existed beyond his gates. A mother so exhausted she could barely stand children so small they still believed the world could be kind if only someone would let them inside. Renee shifted her weight. "If you want us to leave, we'll go right now." "I understand." Vincent's throat tightened. He heard his own voice, low-controlled, say stay. The word surprised him. It surprised her more. Her eyes lifted again, wide with confusion. "Sir, stay," he repeated. "Dry off. Use the guest powder room down the hall. There are towels. I'll have coffee sent in." Renee blinked. "You're sure?" He nodded once. Inside, conflict roared. What was he doing? This was not his world. These were not his people. Yet the sight of Aaliyah's tiny hand reaching toward the gleaming banister, as though testing whether it was real, sent a jolt through him so fierce it bordered on pain. Renee murmured thanks, soft, timid, polite, and shepherded the children forward. Malik shot Vincent a look of pure distrust before following. Zoe clung to the rabbit tighter. Vincent watched them disappear around the corner. Then he leaned against the wall, one hand pressed to his sternum as though he could physically hold the storm inside his chest. Remorse clawed at him, gnawing relentless. He had seen suffering before. He had caused it indirectly through the quiet machinery of his empire. But this was different. This was immediate, human, fragile. He moved to the kitchen, poured 4 more mugs of coffee, black for himself, cream and sugar for the others, though he had no idea what they took. When he carried the tray to the sitting room, he found them clustered near the fireplace. Renee had stripped the twins' wet outer layers, wrapped them in oversized bath towels she must have found in the powder room. Aaliyah sat on the rug, staring at the flames with round eyes. Jamal curled against his mother's side. Malik stood guard by the window, arms crossed. Zoe rocked slightly, rabbit pressed to her cheek. Vincent set the tray on the low table. Renee rose quickly. "You didn't have to drink," he said. Not a command. A plea, almost. She hesitated, then took a mug with shaking hands. The first sip made her close her eyes for a moment, pure relief. Vincent watched the motion and felt something crack wider inside him. He sat across from them in the armchair. Silence stretched thick, heavy with unspoken things. Then Aaliyah looked up at him. She studied his face with grave intensity. Without warning, she pushed to her feet, toddled across the rug, and stopped directly in front of his knees. She lifted both arms. Vincent froze. Renee whispered Aaliyah no. But the little girl ignored her. She reached higher. Vincent's heart slammed against his ribs. He bent slowly, lifted her under the arms, settled her on his lap. She weighed almost nothing. Her small hands patted his suit jacket once, twice, as though checking he was real. Then she leaned forward, pressed her cheek against his chest, and sighed a tiny, contented sound. The room went still. Vincent could not breathe properly. The warmth of her small body seeped through his shirt, the scent of baby shampoo and rain, the absolute trust in that simple lean. Inside him, something ancient and buried tore open, violent, blinding. Guilt and longing and terror collided so fiercely he thought he might shatter. He had spent 23 years building walls against this exact feeling. Now a 22-month-old girl had walked through them without effort. Renee watched, eyes glistening. Malik's shoulders dropped a fraction. Zoe peeked over the rabbit's ear. Vincent wrapped one arm around Aaliyah, careful, almost reverent. His other hand remained clenched on the armrest, knuckles white. He did not speak. He could not. Outside, the rain continued to fall. But in that quiet sitting room, amid the disparity of marble and threadbare socks, something impossible had begun. A rescue neither of them had expected. And a man who had long ago forgotten how to feel anything at all suddenly felt everything sharp, overwhelming, and terrifyingly alive. The rain had finally eased into a fine mist that clung to every surface like regret. Inside the Grosse Pointe mansion, however, the air felt heavier than the weather outside. Vincent Moretti stood at the tall window of the breakfast room, coffee cup forgotten in his hand, watching the 4 children move through the sunlit space like small, cautious shadows in a world too large and too bright for them. Renee had insisted on helping with breakfast despite his quiet offer to have food delivered. She moved with the careful economy of someone who had long ago learned that nothing was ever truly free. She cracked eggs into a stainless steel bowl with hands that trembled slightly from fatigue, whisked them slowly, poured them into the wide non-stick pan he never used. The sizzle was the only sound for several minutes. The twins sat in high chairs Vincent had ordered overnight, delivered before dawn by a discreet service that asked no questions. Aaliyah drummed her tiny palms on the tray content. Jamal stared at the gleaming appliances with solemn fascination. Malik and Zoe sat at the far end of the 12-foot island, backs straight as though the marble might bite. Malik's eyes never left Vincent. They were dark, sharp, old, beyond 7 years. He had not spoken more than 5 words since arriving. Now he watched Vincent the way a street dog watches a man holding food wary, ready to bolt or snap. Renee set plates down gently. Scrambled eggs, toast from bread she had found in the freezer, sliced apples arranged in careful half-moons. Nothing fancy. Everything she touched became an act of quiet dignity. "Thank you," Vincent said. His voice came out rougher than intended. Renee nodded, once small and quick. "It's not much, but it's warm." She sat between the twins, cutting their food into tiny pieces. Her own plate remained empty. Vincent noticed. He pushed a second, helping toward her without a word. She hesitated, eyes flicking to his face, searching for the catch, then took a small bite. The first real food she had eaten in 36 hours, perhaps longer. Her throat worked visibly. Vincent looked away, the sight twisting something deep and vicious inside him. He had spent the night pacing the master suite, replaying the moment Aaliyah leaned against his chest. The weight of her trust had been unbearable. It had cracked open memories he had sealed behind concrete, his sister's small hand in his before the shot rang out, the warmth leaving her fingers while he screamed soundlessly. He had sworn then that no one would ever depend on him again. No one would ever be taken because of him. Now 4 children sat in his kitchen, and the vow felt like ash in his mouth. Malik spoke suddenly, voice low but clear. "You gonna make us leave today?" The question landed like a thrown stone. Renee froze fork halfway to her mouth. Zoe shrank smaller against her brother's side. Aaliyah paused mid-chew, sensing the shift. Vincent met Malik's gaze directly. "No." Malik's jaw tightened. "Why not? You don't know us. We could steal something. Break something. You rich folks always think poor folks steal." The accusation hung between them, raw, practiced, born of too many doors slammed in too many faces. Vincent felt the old defenses rise, the cold mask he wore when rivals tested boundaries. But he forced it down. "I don't think that." Malik snorted softly, disbelieving bitter. "Everybody thinks that," Renee whispered. "Malik, please." "No," the boy said louder now. "He needs to hear it. People like him." He gestured at the gleaming room, the view of the lake, the untouched 6-burner range. "They look at us like we're dirt, like we don't belong anywhere clean." Vincent's hand clenched around the coffee cup. Not anger, at least not at the child. The words cut because they were true enough to sting. He had looked away from suffering for years. He had let neighborhoods rot while his legitimate contracts flourished. He had told himself it was necessary order. Now the accusation sat across from him in the form of a 7-year-old boy whose eyes held too much knowledge. Vincent set the cup down carefully. "I'm not making you leave," he said again. "Not today. Not tomorrow. Not until your mother says otherwise." Malik stared at him for a long beat. Then he looked away, jaw working. We'll see. The rest of breakfast passed in strained quiet. After Renee cleared plates, while the children played tentatively in the sunroom, wide glass walls, plush rugs, toys, Vincent had overnighted in sizes for every age. Aaliyah toddled after a soft stuffed bear. Jamal followed her like a shadow. Zoe sat cross-legged rabbit in lap watching everything. Malik stood by the door, arms folded, refusing to touch anything. Vincent retreated to his study. He tried to work contracts, union negotiations, a discreet message to Jason about increased patrols near Rossi's territory, but focus eluded him. Every few minutes, his gaze drifted to the security feed. 4 small figures in a room designed for adults, their movements tentative as though afraid the luxury might vanish if they breathed too hard. By early afternoon, the tension broke in the worst way. Vincent was crossing the foyer when he heard raised voices from the driveway. He stepped outside. 2 men in dark jackets stood near the gate. Rossi's people, low-level enforcers he recognized from surveillance photos. They had pulled up in an unmarked sedan blocking the entrance. One leaned against the hood, arms crossed. The other was speaking loudly into his phone, gesturing toward the house. Vincent walked down the drive alone, no gun visible, no backup called. Yet, the men straightened when they saw him. Moretti, the taller one, said, "Boss wants a word. Says you're getting soft. Taking in strays now." Vincent stopped 3 paces away. "Tell Antonio if he has something to say, he can say it himself." The shorter man laughed short, ugly. "Heard you got a whole family in there. Woman, kids. You playing house now. That ain't the Vincent we know." Vincent's voice stayed level. "Leave." The taller one stepped forward. "Or what you gonna call your lawyers, your security detail?" Vincent did not blink. "I don't need to call anyone." Silence stretched, charged electric. The men exchanged glances. They knew Vincent's reputation. They also knew he rarely bluffed. Finally, the shorter one muttered, "This ain't over," and they retreated to the car. Tires crunched gravel as they pulled away. Vincent stood motionless until the sedan disappeared around the bend. Then he turned back toward the house. Renee stood in the open doorway, arms wrapped around herself, face pale. Behind her, Malik peered out, eyes wide. She had seen everything. Vincent walked up the steps slowly. When he reached her, he spoke quietly. "They won't come back today." Renee's voice was barely audible. "Who are they? People who don't like change." She searched his face. Fear, confusion, a flicker of something deeper. Gratitude, hope. It was too raw to name. Malik pushed forward. "You scared them off. Just like that." Vincent looked down at the boy. "I asked them to leave." Malik studied him, long searching. Then, almost against his will, he nodded once. Inside, the children had gathered in the foyer. Aaliyah toddled straight to Vincent, arms up again. He lifted her without hesitation this time. She nestled against his shoulder as though she belonged there. Renee watched, tears welling but not falling. Her hands trembled at her sides. She had spent years protecting these children from men who promised safety and delivered pain. Now this man, wealthy beyond imagination, powerful enough to make armed men back down, held her daughter like she was made of glass. The contrast tore at her cracked phone with no minutes left, her shoes with soles worn through nights, spent shivering under thin blankets while landlords banged on doors for rent she didn't have. And here, heated floors, endless food safety she could not comprehend. Her knees buckled slightly. Vincent noticed. He shifted Aaliyah to one arm and extended the other steady open. Renee stared at his hand. Then slowly she took it. The touch was brief, fingers brushing palm, but it burned through both of them. Vincent felt the violence of it, remorse, crashing against protectiveness, guilt warring with a fierce, sudden need to shield her from everything that had ever hurt her. He had never allowed himself to want to save anyone. Now the want consumed him, fierce, terrifying, absolute. Renee felt the shock of it, warmth from a hand that could destroy kindness from eyes that had seen too much darkness. Dizziness swept her, numbness in her fingertips, a roar in her ears. She had learned never to trust power. Yet here it stood holding her child, offering her a lifeline she was too afraid to believe in. Malik watched them both. His shoulders dropped another fraction. Distrust still simmered, but something else flickered there, curiosity perhaps, or the tiniest crack in the wall he had built around his heart. Outside, the mist continued to fall, soft, persistent. Inside, 4 children and 2 broken adults stood in a foyer too grand for any of them. And the first fragile threads of something unbreakable began to weave themselves together, quiet, fierce, and terrifying in their intensity. The sky over Detroit had cleared to a pale, hesitant blue, the kind that promised nothing but delivered cold wind off the river anyway. Vincent Moretti had not slept. He had spent the night in the study, staring at security feeds until the images blurred. Renee folding laundry in the guest wing at 2 in the morning, her movements slow and mechanical. Aaliyah stirring in her crib, small hand reaching for nothing. Malik sitting up in bed until 4 eyes fixed on the door, as though expecting it to open and prove every suspicion right. By 9:30 a.m., Vincent knew he could not keep them locked inside forever. The children needed air, sunlight, something normal. He told Renee they would go to the small public park 3 blocks from the estate line Belle Isle's edge, where the grass was still green and the playground equipment had not yet been tagged with fresh graffiti. He would take only 2 guards plain clothes in a second vehicle. No convoy, no spectacle. Renee agreed, after a long silence. Her voice, when she spoke, was barely above a whisper. They haven't been outside in weeks. Not really. The last time. Someone followed us home from the corner store. I thought they were going to take the twins. Vincent felt the words land like stones in his stomach. He nodded once. They won't today. The drive took 7 minutes. 2 black SUVs, his in front, the detail behind. Renee sat in the passenger seat beside him, hands folded tightly in her lap, the twins strapped into car seats in the back row. Malik and Zoe rode in the second vehicle with the guards. No one spoke much. The radio stayed off. Only the soft rhythm of Aaliyah humming to herself broke the quiet. They parked near the playground entrance. Vincent stepped out, first scanned the area, habit, instinct. A few families dotted the grass, a mother pushing a stroller, 2 teenagers on swings, an elderly man feeding pigeons. Ordinary. Safe. He opened Renee's door. She climbed out slowly, legs unsteady after so many days confined. The twins reached for her immediately. Vincent lifted Jamal without thinking. Renee took Aaliyah. The little girl settled against her mother's shoulder content. They walked toward the playground. Malik ran ahead, then stopped looking back every few steps as though afraid the ground might disappear. Zoe trailed behind Rabbit, clutched to her chest. Vincent kept pace beside Renee. He did not touch her. He did not need to. The proximity alone was enough to make his pulse uneven, sharp, insistent. Every time she glanced at him, confusion flickered in her eyes, mixed with something softer, more dangerous, tentative trust. They reached the swings. Aaliyah pointed, babbling. Renee set her down gently. The toddler toddled forward, arms outstretched toward the chains. Vincent knelt without a word, lifted her onto the rubber seat, wrapped her small hands around the links. He gave the swing the gentlest push. Aaliyah laughed high, clear the sound, cutting straight through him. Renee watched, arms wrapped around herself. Tears shimmered but did not fall. "She's never been on a real swing before," she said softly. "We only had the broken one behind the apartment. Someone stole the chains last winter." Vincent's jaw tightened. He pushed again, slow, careful. Inside, remorse burned hotter than ever. He pictured her apartment, thin walls letting in every cold draft, roaches in the corners, eviction notices taped to the door month after month. Nights when the heat was cut and she piled every blanket she owned over 4 small bodies, lying awake, listening to their breathing, terrified one cough would turn into something she could not afford to fix. He had millions in accounts he barely checked. She had counted pennies for formula. The contrast was obscene. Malik approached slowly. "Can I push her?" Vincent stepped aside. The boy took the chains carefully, gave a small push. Aaliyah squealed in delight. For a moment, Malik's face softened, almost a smile. Then the moment shattered. A dark gray sedan rolled slowly along the park road, too slow. Windows tinted. Vincent's body went rigid. He moved instinctively, placing himself between the car and the children. The sedan stopped 20 yards away. Doors opened. 3 men stepped out, Rossi's mid-level crew faces he recognized from grainy photos. No guns visible. Not yet. The lead man, broad shoulders, shaved head, called out loud enough to carry. "Moretti, nice family outing. Didn't know you were in the babysitting business now." Vincent did not answer. He signaled the detail with a subtle hand gesture. The 2 guards moved closer, flanking the playground perimeter. Renee scooped Aaliyah up immediately. Jamal clung to her leg. Malik stepped in front of Zoe, small fists clenched. The lead man took 2 steps forward. "Boss says you're distracted. Says it makes you weak. We're just here to remind you territory don't wait for story time." Vincent's voice was ice. "Walk away." The man laughed short, mocking. "Or what, you gonna protect your little charity case in front of the kids?" Vincent felt the shift inside him, violent, absolute. Not anger at the taunt. Rage at the threat to them. To her, to the children who had already lost too much. He took 1 step forward. "Last warning." The man hesitated. He glanced at his companions. They shifted uneasily. They knew Vincent's reputation. They knew he did not bluff in public. After a long beat, the lead man raised both hands, mock surrender. "We're going. For now." They retreated to the sedan. Doors slammed. Tires peeled away. Silence returned, thick, trembling. Renee's knees gave out. She sank to the grass, still holding Aaliyah tightly. Tears spilled, now silent and unstoppable. They know where we are. Vincent knelt beside her. They won't touch you. She looked up at him, eyes wide with horror, confusion, raw fear. How can you be sure? Because I won't let them. The words came from somewhere deeper than calculation. They came from the place that had cracked open the moment Aaliyah leaned against him, from the place that now screamed to protect these 5 fragile lives with everything he had. Aaliyah squirmed in her mother's arms. She reached out small hand toward Vincent's face. He caught her fingers gently. She patted his cheek once, twice. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his simple, instinctive, trusting. Vincent closed his eyes. The contact was electric warmth flooding through him, cracking open every sealed chamber. Love, fierce, burning, paternal, surged so powerfully it stole his breath. This child. These children. This woman who had carried them through hell with nothing but her bare hands. He wanted to shield them from every wind, every hunger, every unfair door slammed in their faces. Renee watched him shock, giving way to something deeper. Overwhelming attachment bloomed in her chest, passionate, terrifying. She had spent years teaching herself not to hope. Now hope stood before her in the form of a man who commanded fear and offered safety without asking for anything in return. She reached out hesitant, trembling, and placed her hand over his where it held Aaliyah's. The touch was brief. It was enough. Malik stood frozen a few feet away. His eyes moved from the retreating car to Vincent to Renee. Distrust still lingered, but it was fraying, torn by the sight of a powerful man kneeling in grass to comfort a toddler. Zoe crept closer, rabbit dangling from one hand. She touched Vincent's sleeve, light questioning. Vincent opened his eyes. He looked at each of them, 4 small faces, one exhausted woman, and felt the violent inner war reach its peak remorse for every year. He had stayed distant protectiveness so intense, it hurt a longing to be worthy of the trust they were. Beginning to give, he stood slowly lifting Aaliyah with him. She nestled against his shoulder as though she had always belonged there. "Let's go home," he said quietly. Renee rose shaky but steadier than before. She took Jamal's hand. Malik fell in beside her. Zoe slipped her small fingers into Vincent's free hand. They walked back to the SUVs together, 5 children, 1 woman, 1 man who had once believed solitude was safety. The wind off the river was cold, but for the first time in 23 years, Vincent did not feel it. He felt only the small, warm weight in his arms, and the fierce, unbreakable promise forming inside him no one would hurt them again, not while he still breathed. The morning light filtered through the mansion's tall windows in soft golden shafts that caught dust motes like tiny stars suspended in time. Vincent Moretti had risen at 5 as always, but today the routine felt hollow. He had spent the previous night in the guest wing hallway, sitting on the floor outside the children's rooms, back against the wall, knees drawn up, listening to their breathing through the closed doors. Aaliyah had whimpered once around 3 in the morning. He had slipped inside without waking. Renee lifted the toddler from her crib and held her until the small sounds quieted. When he returned to his own bed at dawn, sleep refused him. The warmth of her small body lingered on his shirt like a brand. By 8:47 a.m., the household stirred. Renee appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair still braided from sleep, eyes shadowed with exhaustion that no amount of rest could erase. She wore the same faded sweatshirt from yesterday, sleeves rolled 3 times to fit her thin wrists. The twins trailed behind her in mismatched pajamas Vincent had ordered in haste, soft cotton sets with cartoon animals tags still attached. Jamal rubbed his eyes with one fist. Aaliyah clutched a stuffed bear to her chest, the one Malik had finally allowed himself to touch the night before. Renee paused when she saw Vincent already at the island, pouring orange juice into 4 plastic cups with cartoon characters on them. He had never owned such things before yesterday. "Good morning," she said softly, timid, polite, the voice of someone who had learned early that loud words invited trouble. Vincent nodded. "Sit. I made breakfast." She hesitated. "You don't have to. I want to." The words came out quieter than he intended. Renee searched his face, confusion flickering, then something warmer, more vulnerable. She guided the twins to the table. Malik and Zoe followed a moment later, Malik's gaze still wary but less sharp. They ate in near silence oatmeal with sliced bananas, warm milk toast with strawberry jam. Renee took small bites as though afraid the food might disappear. Vincent watched her every careful chew every time she glanced at the children to make sure they were eating enough. The disparity clawed at him again. His refrigerator stocked with organic produce delivered weekly. Her stories whispered last night of skipping meals, so the twins could have formula of boiling water on a hot plate because the stove had been repossessed. After breakfast, Renee cleared plates while the children played in the sunroom. Vincent retreated to his study, but the restlessness followed him. He opened his laptop, routine checks on contracts, union reports, yet his mind kept drifting to the hallway, to Aaliyah's hazel eyes so eerily like his own in childhood photographs his mother once kept. At 10:23, the intercom buzzed. Jason's voice calm, professional. "Boss, we have a situation. Private clinic on Woodward. They're asking for you. Discreet. Urgent." Vincent's pulse quickened. He had taken Aaliyah there the previous evening after she developed a low fever routine check, he told himself. Blood draw for precaution. Results were supposed to be routine too. He drove alone. The clinic was small, exclusive, the kind that catered to people who valued privacy above all. The doctor, Dr. Elena Hargrove, someone Jason had vetted years ago, met him in a quiet consultation room. She closed the door softly. "Mr. Moretti," she began, voice measured. "The blood work on the little girl Aaliyah, and her brother Jamal. We ran standard panels, but the typing, it flagged something unusual." Vincent sat very still. "Doctor." Hargrove slid a printed report across the desk. "Their blood type AB negative, rare. Yours is the same. Exact markers. Probability of paternity. 99.9, 9% for both." The room tilted. Vincent stared at the paper. Numbers blurred. Dates. Percentages. He did the math in his head, 22 months old. 2.5 years ago. The night after the anniversary of his sister's death. He had gone to a quiet bar on the east side, drowned grief in whiskey until the edges softened. He remembered fragments, a woman's voice, gentle, broken. Darkness. Waking alone in a cheap motel head, pounding clothes rumpled. He had left without looking back. But now, he felt the floor drop away. Numbness spread from his fingertips upward. Dizziness crashed over him, violent, disorienting. He gripped the desk edge until his knuckles whitened. Dr. Hargrove spoke gently. There was no consent form for paternity testing, but the match is unmistakable. "If this is unexpected, it is," Vincent said. His voice cracked on the last syllable. He stood. The room spun. He braced one hand against the wall. Memories assaulted him, Renee's hollow cheeks, the way she counted every bite the twins took the nights she had carried them alone, through eviction threats, power shutoffs, hunger that left her dizzy and shaking. She had done it all, believing the father was a ghost, nameless, gone before dawn. And he had been that ghost. Guilt tore through him, raw, consuming a storm so fierce it stole his breath. He had left her to face everything, pregnancy alone, labor without a hand to hold nights, pacing a freezing apartment while the twins cried from colic or fever or simple need. He had millions in offshore accounts while she pawned her mother's old wedding ring to buy diapers. He walked out without another word. The drive home blurred traffic lights bleeding into streaks of red and green. When he pulled into the garage, his hands shook on the wheel. Inside, the house was quiet. Renee sat on the sunroom rug, twins in her lap, reading a picture book in a soft, steady voice. Malik and Zoe lay nearby, listening. The scene was so ordinary, so achingly tender, it nearly undid him. Renee looked up, saw his face. Her own went pale. "Mr. Moretti." Vincent crossed the room slowly. He knelt before her knees, hitting the rug with a dull thud. Aaliyah reached for him immediately. He lifted her, settled her against his chest. She sighed contentedly, small hand patting his collar. He looked at Renee, really looked. Saw the faint scar above her eyebrow from a fall when she was 9, the way her lips trembled when she was afraid to hope. "I need to tell you something," he said. Voice low, rough. Renee's arms tightened around Jamal. "What is it?" Vincent swallowed. "The blood work. From yesterday. Aaliyah and Jamal. They're mine. Biologically." Silence stretched endless, deafening. Renee's face drained of color. She swayed slightly, dizziness visible in the way her eyes unfocused, the way her breath hitched. "No," she whispered. That's not possible." Vincent held her gaze. "It is." She stared at him. Horror bloomed first, wide-eyed, frozen. Then confusion, head shaking slowly. Then shock so deep it numbed her features. Her hands trembled violently. Jamal whimpered, sensing it. Renee pressed a hand to her mouth. Tears spilled, silent, unstoppable. 2.5 years, she said, voice cracking. "I looked for him. For the man. I went back to that bar. I asked. No one knew. I thought he was gone forever. I carried them alone. I almost lost them twice, once in labor, once when the heat was cut in January and Jamal got sick. I sold everything. I begged. And you!" She trailed off. The words hung, accusation, pain, disbelief. Vincent felt every syllable like a blade. Remorse roared through him, violent, unrelenting. He wanted to reach for her. He did not dare. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear. That night, I was drowning. My sister's anniversary. I don't remember much. I woke up alone. I never looked back. I thought it was better that way, for everyone. Renee laughed, a small broken sound. Better. She looked down at the twins. Aaliyah nestled against Vincent's shoulder. Jamal stared up at his mother with wide eyes. Renee's shoulders shook. They have your eyes, she whispered. I saw it the first day. I told myself it was impossible. Just a coincidence. Vincent bowed his head. I'm sorry. The words were inadequate. They always would be. Renee lifted her gaze to his. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I survived without you. I kept them alive. Every day, every cold night, every empty cupboard. I did it. Vincent nodded, slow, aching. You did. A long stillness followed. The sun moved across the rug. Shadows lengthened. Then Renee reached out slowly, trembling, and placed her hand on Aaliyah's back, where the toddler rested against Vincent's chest. Her fingers brushed his shirt. The contact was feather-light. It burned. I don't know what to feel, she said. I'm scared, angry, confused. But she trusts you. They all do. And she faltered. Tears fell faster. Vincent covered her hand with his gentle, careful. You don't have to decide anything today, or tomorrow. Just stay. Let me help. Let me protect them. Protect you. Renee searched his face, long searching. Fear lingered, but beneath it something new flickered, overwhelming attachment, passionate and burning, born in the space between suspicion and the first fragile seed of trust. She did not pull away. Outside, the wind whispered against the glass. Inside, a father held his daughter for the first time, knowing who she was, and a mother who had carried the world alone began slowly, painfully to believe she might not have to anymore. The mansion felt different now, less like a fortress, more like a fragile sanctuary holding its breath. Vincent Moretti had not left the property since the revelation. He canceled meetings, redirected calls to Jason, kept his phone on silent. The world outside continued its slow grind of power plays and shadowed deals, but inside these walls, time had narrowed to the rhythm of small footsteps, soft voices, and the quiet creak of floorboards under careful weight. Renee moved through the house like someone walking on thin ice. She accepted the guest suite. Vincent offered 3 bedrooms, private bath, walk-in closet, larger than her old apartment, but she still folded the children's clothes on the edge of the king-sized bed rather than use the dresser. Drawers. She cooked simple meals in the kitchen, refusing the chef he suggested, as though accepting more help would make the illusion shatter. Her hands shook when she poured milk. Her eyes darted to the windows every few minutes. The knowledge that the twins were Vincent's had not settled. It hovered sharp and unresolvable, cutting deeper with every shared glance. Malik felt it most acutely. The boy had withdrawn further since the park confrontation. He spoke in monosyllables, ate standing up as though ready to run, slept with one eye open. Vincent watched him from doorways, saw the way Malik positioned himself between the younger children, and every entrance saw the way his small shoulders never relaxed. At 11:17 a.m., Vincent found Malik in the sunroom alone. The other children were napping. Renee was in the laundry room folding towels. Malik sat cross-legged on the rug, staring at a toy truck he had not touched. Vincent entered quietly. Mind if I sit? Malik shrugged, small, guarded. Vincent lowered himself to the floor, back against the wall, legs stretched out. Silence stretched between them, long, heavy. Finally Malik spoke, voice flat. You gonna send us away, now that you know they're yours? Vincent's chest tightened. No. Malik looked at him, eyes narrowed. Why not? We're not clean. Not like this place. We break things. We make noise. We're trouble. Vincent exhaled slowly. Your children. Not trouble. Malik laughed short, bitter. That's what they all say. Until the first time the rent's late. Until the lights go out. Until someone knocks too hard on the door. Vincent felt the words slice deep. He pictured Renee's old apartment, peeling paint windows taped with cardboard against winter drafts. The landlord's fist pounding at midnight because the check was 3 days late. He pictured her standing in the doorway, thin arms wrapped around 4 sleeping children, whispering apologies to a man who did not care. The remorse was physical now, gnawing relentless, a fist around his heart. Malik continued quieter. My dad tried to protect us. He worked 2 jobs. Then one night he didn't come home. They found him in an alley. Said it was random. I know it wasn't. Guys like the ones at the park. They don't like people who ask questions. Vincent closed his eyes for a second. I'm sorry. Malik shrugged again, small practiced. Everybody's sorry. Doesn't change anything. Vincent opened his eyes. It won't bring him back. But it can change what happens next. Malik studied him, long searching. Then he looked away. We'll see. The afternoon passed in uneasy, quiet. Renee read to the twins in the library. Zoe colored at the table. Malik shadowed them like a sentinel. At 4:32 p.m., the first real crack appeared. Vincent was in the foyer when the security panel lit up motion sensors at the rear gate. He checked the feed, 2 men on foot, dark jackets, moving along the service alley behind the property. They paused near the fence line, one pointing toward the house. Vincent recognized the posture Rossi's surveillance team. He moved fast out the back door across the lawn alone. The men saw him coming. They straightened. Vincent stopped 10 feet away. "You're on private property," the taller one smirked. "Just taking a walk, Moretti. Nice yard. Heard you got company now. Cute kids." Vincent's voice dropped. "Leave." The shorter one laughed. "Boss says you're distracted. Says a man with baggage makes mistakes. We're just making sure you remember who's watching." Vincent took one step forward. "Tell Antonio if he wants to talk, he calls. If he sends another watcher near this house, the next conversation won't be this polite." The men exchanged glances. They backed away, slow, deliberate, then turned and disappeared into the alley. Vincent stood there until they were gone. His hands shook not from fear but from the white-hot rage of a father protecting what was his. When he returned inside, Malik was waiting in the hallway. The boy had watched from an upper window. "You scared them again," Malik said. "Not a question." Vincent nodded. Malik swallowed. "They'll come back. They might." Malik's voice cracked small, raw. "What if they hurt her? Or the little ones? What if they hurt Mom?" Vincent knelt to the boy's level. "They won't." Malik's eyes filled tears. He refused to let fall. "You don't know that. Nobody protects us." "Not really." Dad tried. "He's gone. Now we're here and you're just another guy with power. Power runs out." Vincent felt the accusation like a physical blow. He reached out slowly and placed a hand on Malik's shoulder. The boy flinched but did not pull away. "I won't run out," Vincent said. "Not on them. Not on you." Malik stared at him, long searching. Then in a rush of motion too fast to anticipate, he threw his arms around Vincent's neck, small body shaking. Silent sobs muffled against Vincent's shirt. Vincent froze, then wrapped both arms around the boy. Held him tightly. Felt the sharp bones under thin skin, felt the years of fear and loss pouring out in quiet tremors. Inside him the storm reached its peak, remorse, crashing against protectiveness, guilt warring with fierce, burning love. These children his blood, and not had become the center of his world in days. He would burn the city down before he let harm touch them. Renee appeared at the end of the hallway. She stopped, saw her son clinging to this powerful man, saw the tears on Malik's cheeks. Her own eyes filled. She crossed the distance, slowly knelt beside them. Malik lifted his head, looked at her. He said he won't run out. Renee's voice broke. "I believe him." She reached out hesitant, then wrapped her arms around both of them. Vincent felt her tremble, felt the thinness of her frame, the exhaustion carved into every line. He shifted, drew her closer, careful, reverent. The three of them stayed like that, kneeling in the wide hallway of a mansion, too grand for grief, while the twins slept upstairs and Zoe colored quietly in the next room. Outside, the wind picked up cold, insistent. Inside, something unbreakable took root. Malik pulled back first, wiped his face with his sleeve. "Don't tell the little ones," I cried. Vincent smiled, small, genuine. "Never." Renee touched Malik's cheek, gentle, loving. Then she looked at Vincent. Her eyes held fear, wonder, and a trust so fierce it hurt to see. "Thank you," she whispered. Vincent shook his head. "Don't thank me. Just stay." She nodded once, small. The war outside was escalating. Rossi's men would return. Threats would sharpen. But in this moment, quiet, condensed, sacred, the breaking point had passed. And what emerged from it was stronger than fear. A family, fragile, unexpected, fiercely claimed. The mansion had settled into an uneasy rhythm, meals at set times, naps in sun-warmed rooms, quiet evenings where the only sounds were pages turning and soft breathing. Vincent Moretti had become a constant, unobtrusive presence, reading picture books in a low voice that still sounded too rough for the words, carrying Aaliyah when her legs tired, sitting on the floor with Zoe, while she arranged blocks into fragile towers. He moved carefully around them, as though one wrong step might shatter the fragile trust they had begun to offer. Renee watched him with eyes that held equal parts wonder and wariness. She still folded her own clothes on the chair rather than the dresser, still checked the refrigerator at night, as though expecting it to empty by morning. Sleep came in fragments, 3 hours here, 2 there, haunted by memories of nights when the wind howled through cracked windows and the twins coughed until dawn. She had once fallen asleep standing at the stove, waking only when the pot boiled dry and the landlord's fist pounded the door. Now the house was warm, the bed soft, the pantry full. The contrast left her dizzy numb at unexpected moments, as though her body had not yet caught up to the safety surrounding her. Malik remained the outlier. The boy spoke more since his breakdown in the hallway, but the words were careful, measured. He accepted food, accepted stories, but kept one eye on the doors, one ear tuned to every sound from outside. He still positioned himself between the younger ones and any stranger, even Vincent, on some days. At 9:42 p.m., the crisis arrived without warning. Zoe had been quieter all day, cheeks flushed, breathing shallow. Renee noticed first. She pressed a hand to the girl's forehead, felt the heat, felt her own heart drop. Asthma. The inhaler, her last one, was in the old apartment, forgotten in the rush to leave. She had meant to refill it weeks ago, but the pharmacy required a new prescription, and the clinic appointment had been canceled twice because the doctor's office lost her file. Renee knelt beside Zoe on the sunroom rug. Baby breathed slow. Just slow. Zoe wheezed small, frightened sounds. Her lips tinged blue at the edges. Renee's hands shook. She looked up, wild-eyed, desperate. "I don't have her medicine. It's gone." Vincent appeared in the doorway. He took one look at Zoe's face and moved. "Tell me what she needs. Albuterol, inhaler, nebulizer, if it's bad." But the prescription, Vincent was already on the phone. Jason. Woodward Clinic. Pediatric asthma meds. Albuterol inhaler nebulizer solution, full pediatric dose. Now. Discreet. Bring it here. He hung up, knelt beside Renee. "It'll be here in 20 minutes. Renee stared at him. "How I know people." Zoe's wheeze deepened, painful, ragged. Renee gathered the girl into her lap, rocking gently, whispering, "You're okay, baby. You're okay." Vincent stayed close enough to feel Renee's trembling, close enough to see the terror in her eyes. He reached out slowly and placed his hand over Zoe's small back, rubbing gentle circles the way he had seen Renee do with the twins. Minutes crawled. Zoe's breathing grew more labored. Renee's tears fell silently onto the girl's hair. She rocked faster, voice cracking. "Please, God. Not her. Not after everything." Vincent felt the plea like a knife. He had watched men beg for their lives in back rooms. He had never heard a mother beg for her child's breath. The sound tore something final inside him, remorse so violent it blurred his vision. He had lived in a world where power bought silence, loyalty, fear. Now power bought only time, 20 minutes that felt like 20 years. At 9:58 p.m., Jason arrived, breathless, black medical bag in hand. Vincent met him at the garage door, took the bag without a word, returned to the sunroom. Renee's hands shook too badly to open the packaging. Vincent took the inhaler, careful, steady, shook it, placed the mouthpiece against Zoe's lips. "Breathe in, sweetheart. Slow." Zoe tried. The medicine misted. Once. Twice. Her wheeze eased fractionally at first, then more steadily. Color crept back into her cheeks. Renee exhaled a shuddering sound that was half sob, half relief. She clutched Zoe tighter. "Thank you," she whispered to Vincent, to the ceiling, to anyone listening. Vincent stayed kneeling. He did not move his hand from Zoe's back until her breathing leveled completely. Renee looked at him, eyes red-rimmed, shining. "You didn't have to. I did." The words came from the deepest place inside him, the place that had frozen 23 years ago and now thawed in painful, jagged pieces. Malik had watched everything from the doorway, silent, unseen until now. He stepped forward slowly. His face was pale, eyes wide. Vincent noticed him. "She's okay now." Malik nodded, small, mechanical. Then he walked to the corner of the room, sat against the wall, knees drawn up. He stared at the floor. Renee carried Zoe upstairs to bed. The twins were already asleep. The house quieted. Vincent remained on the rug. Malik did not move. After several minutes, Malik spoke, voice so low it was almost lost. "I saw you cry." Vincent looked at him. "I did." Malik swallowed. "You weren't pretending. You were scared she'd stop breathing." Vincent nodded once. Malik's voice cracked. "My dad, he got shot. I was there. I saw the blood. I tried to stop it. My hands were red." He looked at me like he was sorry. Then he wasn't looking anymore. Vincent closed his eyes briefly, painfully. "I'm sorry." Malik wiped his face with his sleeve. "You didn't let Zoe go. You got the medicine. You stayed. You cried." Vincent opened his eyes, met the boy's gaze. Malik stood slowly, walked across the rug, stopped in front of Vincent. Then without warning, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Vincent's neck. Small body shaking, face buried against Vincent's shoulder. Vincent froze, then wrapped both arms around him, held him tightly, felt the sharp edges of ribs under thin cotton, felt the years of fear and grief pouring out in silent waves. "I don't want to lose anyone else," Malik whispered. Vincent's voice broke. "You won't." They stayed like that, kneeling on the sunroom rug, under soft lamplight, while the house slept around them. Renee appeared in the doorway. She stopped, saw her son clinging to this man who had once been a stranger, saw the tears on Malik's cheeks, saw Vincent's shoulders shaking with quiet sobs he no longer tried to hide. She crossed the room slowly, knelt beside them, wrapped her arms around both thin frame, trembling with exhaustion, relief overwhelming love. Vincent felt her warmth against his side, felt Malik's small heartbeat against his chest, felt the violent collision inside him reach its crescendo remorse for every year he had stayed cold, protectiveness so fierce it burned, a paternal love so absolute it terrified him. Renee whispered against his shoulder, "You saved her." Vincent shook his head barely. "She saved me." Malik pulled back slightly, looked between them, eyes red but clearer than before. "I believe you now," he said to Vincent. "About not running out." Vincent nodded, unable to speak. Renee touched Malik's cheek, gentle, loving. Then she looked at Vincent. Her eyes held everything, fear that still lingered, confusion that had not fully faded, and a trust so deep and burning it stole the air from the room. In that quiet, condensed stillness, three people holding each other on a rug worth more than Renee's old apartment, the turning point arrived. Not with fanfare, not with promises, with tears, with arms wrapped tight, with the simple, shattering realization that protection could be real, and that sometimes the strongest walls fell not to force, but to the weight of a child's trust. Outside, the wind whispered against the windows, cold, distant. Inside, a family forged in pain, bound by kindness, began to heal. The mansion carried a fragile peace that morning, like glass balanced on the edge of a table, beautiful and waiting to fall. Vincent Moretti had begun to breathe differently in his own home, deeper inhalations when Aaliyah climbed into his lap, uninvited slower exhales when Malik finally accepted a second, helping at breakfast without suspicion shadowing his eyes. Renee still moved with the caution of someone who had once been thrown away, but the lines of exhaustion around her mouth had softened. She smiled, small, tentative, when Zoe showed her a drawing of 4 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. The illusion of safety held until 11:37 a.m. Vincent was in the study reviewing encrypted messages from Jason, reports of increased movement around Rossi's warehouses, when the security system chimed once front gate. Not a delivery, not a scheduled visitor. A single black Mercedes sedan, tinted windows, no plates visible on the feed. He watched the monitor as the car stopped. The driver's door opened. Sophia stepped out. She wore a cream wool coat that cost more than Renee's entire wardrobe, blonde hair swept into a low knot, heels clicking sharply on the cobblestone drive. She carried no bag, only a thin manila envelope. Her face was composed, but Vincent recognized the tightness around her mouth, the look she wore when she had lost control of a situation. He met her at the door himself, no guards summoned. "Not yet." "Sophia," she lifted her chin. "We need to talk." Vincent stepped aside. She entered, heels echoing through the foyer like accusations. She stopped in the center of the marble floor, turning slowly to take in the space she had once assumed would be hers. "Still playing house, I see," she said. Her voice carried the polished edge of someone raised in boardrooms and private clubs. Vincent closed the door. "Say what you came to say." Sophia opened the envelope, removed 3 printed photographs. She held them up one by one. The first, Renee at the old apartment door, twins on her hip face, gaunt under fluorescent hallway light. The second, Aaliyah and Jamal in the park 2 days earlier, laughing on the swings. The third, Vincent kneeling beside Zoe in the sunroom, hand on her back face, etched with fear and tenderness. Sophia's lips curved, small, cold. "You really thought no one was watching?" Vincent's hands remained at his sides. "You had them followed." "Not me," she said. "My father, he's disappointed. He thought the arrangement between us was mutually beneficial. Power, influence, a clear line of succession. Instead, you're playing daddy to some street kids and their mother." Vincent felt the old mask slip into place, cold, unreadable. But beneath it, rage simmered, not for himself, but for them. For the way Sophia spoke of Renee and the children as inconveniences, as disposable. "Leave," he said quietly. Sophia laughed short, brittle. "You don't understand. This isn't about jealousy. This is about leverage." She reached into her coat pocket, removed a single sheet of paper, hospital letterhead dated 2.5 years earlier. Vincent's blood went cold. The document listed a blood draw from an unconscious patient, him after a night he barely remembered. Attached a note from a nurse, flagged for follow-up. Below it, a lab report. Sperm sample collected. Viability confirmed. Donor consent form forged signature. Sophia watched his face. "You were too drunk to notice. Too broken over your sister's anniversary. One of my father's people slipped something into your drink at that bar. The woman you met, she wasn't random. She was paid. A setup. To create a child. A bargaining chip. They never expected twins. Or that you'd ever find out." Vincent stared at the paper. The room tilted slowly at first, then violently. Nausea rose sharp and sudden. He gripped the edge of the console table until wood creaked under his fingers. Sophia continued, voice calm. My father wanted insurance. If you ever crossed him, he'd have proof you abandoned your own blood. Proof you were weak, unfit. The plan was to wait, to use it when the time was right. But you changed the timeline. You brought them here. You made it personal. Vincent's voice came out low, dangerous. You knew, from the beginning. Sophia's eyes glittered. I was supposed to keep you distracted, keep you close, but you threw it away. For her, for them. Vincent took one step forward. Get out. Sophia did not move. Not yet. My father's terms are simple. Send them away. Tonight. Or he releases everything, medical records, surveillance photos, the forged consent. The press will love it. Detroit's most powerful man fathers children with a homeless woman, abandons them, then plays savior for optics. Your legitimate contracts will dry up. Your allies will distance themselves. You'll be finished. Vincent felt the world narrow to a single point, the woman standing before him, threatening the only thing that had ever mattered since his sister died. He spoke slowly, each word measured. You tell Antonio this. If he touches them, if he comes near this house, near Renee, near any of those children, I will end him. Not quietly, not cleanly. I will burn every bridge he has, every deal, every secret. And when there's nothing left, I'll look him in the eye and finish it myself. Sophia's composure cracked just a fraction. You're bluffing. Vincent stepped closer. Try me. Silence stretched, charged, lethal. Then Sophia turned, walked to the door, paused with her hand on the knob. You'll regret this, she said softly. They always do. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Vincent stood motionless in the foyer. The photographs lay scattered on the marble, evidence of a betrayal so deep it felt like acid in his veins. Remorse crashed over him, violent, suffocating. He had been used, manipulated. The one night he had allowed himself to be human had been twisted into a weapon. And Renee had paid the price. Alone, pregnant, terrified, while he slept in silk sheets and drank $1,000 whiskey to forget. He walked upstairs, slow, deliberate, found Renee in the nursery. She was changing Aaliyah's diaper, humming softly. The toddler cooed, kicking small legs. Jamal slept in the crib beside her. Renee looked up, saw his face, froze. Vincent. He crossed the room, knelt beside her, took her hands cold, trembling between his. I need to tell you something. Her eyes widened, fear flickering. What happened? He told her every word Sophia had spoken. The setup, the forged consent, the photographs, the threat. Renee listened, face draining of color. When he finished, she swayed, dizziness visible in the way her eyes unfocused, the way her breath hitched. They planned it. Her voice was small, broken. That night, it wasn't even real. Vincent bowed his head. I didn't know, I swear. Renee pulled her hands away slowly, as though the touch burned. She stood, backed against the changing table. Tears spilled, silent, endless. I carried them alone, she whispered. I thought it was my fault. That I wasn't enough. That I drove him away. I starved so they could eat. I worked until I bled. I begged landlords for one more week. And it was all a game. Vincent rose. It wasn't your fault. Renee laughed, a shattered sound. I know that now. But I lived it. Every day. Every cold night. Every time I held them while they cried and I had nothing left to give. She slid down the wall, legs giving out, sat on the floor, knees drawn up, face buried in her hands. Vincent knelt before her again, did not touch her, simply waited. After long minutes, Renee lifted her head, looked at him, eyes red, raw. You didn't know, she said. But you're here now. Vincent nodded, slow, aching. Renee reached out, hesitant, touched his cheek. You saved Zoe. You held Malik when he broke. You read to them every night. You see them, really see them. Vincent covered her hand with his. I see you. Renee's breath caught. Tears fell faster. I'm terrified, she whispered. Of losing them. Of losing this. Of believing it's real. Vincent leaned forward, forehead resting gently against hers. It's real. In that quiet nursery, sunlight slanting across the cribs, Aaliyah cooing softly in her sleep, the betrayal twisted into something else, unbreakable resolve. Vincent would protect them. Not because of blood, not because of threats, because love fierce, paternal, all-consuming had claimed him completely. And nothing, not Rossi, not Sophia, not the past, would take them away. Outside, the wind rose cold, warning. Inside, a father and a mother knelt together on soft carpet, holding on to the only thing that mattered. Each other. And the children who had healed them both. The sky over Detroit had turned the color of old steel, low, heavy clouds pressing down as though the city itself were holding its breath. Inside the Grosse Pointe mansion, the atmosphere had thickened into something almost tangible, a quiet that felt like the moment before a storm breaks. Vincent Moretti had not slept. He had spent the night walking the perimeter of the house, checking locks, watching feeds, listening for any sound that did not belong. Sophia's visit had stripped away the last illusion of safety. The threat was no longer distant. It was personal. It wore a face. It knew their names. Renee felt it too. She moved through the morning with mechanical precision, folding small clothes, wiping counters that were already spotless, glancing at every window as though expecting shadows to reach through the glass. Her hands once steady when she had no choice but to be now trembled when she poured cereal for the twins. She had not eaten breakfast herself. Her stomach twisted too tightly with fear and the lingering shock of yesterday's revelation. At 3:17 p.m., Vincent made the decision. They could not stay locked inside forever. The children needed movement, air, normalcy, even if only for an hour. He chose the quiet stretch of Riverfront Park near the mansion's private access path, a narrow strip of grass and benches rarely used this time of year. 2 guards would follow at a distance. No convoy, no spectacle, just a short walk, Renee agreed after long hesitation. Her voice was soft, almost inaudible. They need to run, to feel the wind. They've been so still. Vincent nodded. We'll keep it short. They left through the side gate, Vincent carrying Aaliyah on his hip, Renee holding Jamal's hand, Malik and Zoe walking between them. The guards trailed 50 yards back, unobtrusive in plain clothes. The air was sharp with coming winter. The river smelled of cold metal and wet leaves. Aaliyah pointed at the water, babbling happily. Jamal tugged Renee's sleeve, wanting to chase a gull. Malik walked with shoulders squared, eyes scanning every direction. They reached the first bench. Vincent set Aaliyah down. She toddled forward, small legs pumping toward a patch of grass where sunlight broke through the clouds. Renee smiled, small, fragile, and let Jamal run after her. Zoe followed more slowly, rabbit dangling from one hand. Vincent stood beside Renee, close enough to feel her warmth, close enough to see the pulse jumping in her throat. You're shaking, he said quietly. Renee wrapped her arms around herself. I keep waiting for it to disappear. All of this. Like waking up from a dream and finding the apartment cold again. No heat. No food. Just the wind coming through the cracks. Vincent felt the words strike deep, each one a fresh wound. He pictured her nights huddled under a single blanket with 4 children listening to pipes groan as temperatures dropped below freezing, praying the pipes would not burst because repairmen charged up front. He pictured her counting change for bus fare, skipping meals so the twins could have milk, crying silently in the dark so they would not hear. He reached out slowly and placed his hand on her shoulder. She did not flinch. Instead, she leaned just a fraction into the touch. Then the world exploded. A black SUV roared along the river road too fast, windows down. 2 men leaned out, faces masked. One raised a handgun. Vincent moved without thought. He scooped Aaliyah up in one arm, shoved Renee and Jamal behind the nearest bench with the other. Downshots cracked 3, 4 sharp echoes bouncing off the water. Vincent dropped to one knee, shielding Aaliyah with his body. The toddler screamed high, terrified. He felt the first bullet graze his left shoulder, hot, searing. The second struck lower ribs. Pain bloomed white-hot. He rolled behind the bench, pulling Aaliyah tight against his chest. Stay down, baby. Stay down. Renee crawled to them, face ashen, dragging Jamal. Malik and Zoe were already flat on the grass, Malik's arm protectively over Zoe's head. The SUV slowed tires, screeching. One man leaned farther out, aiming. Vincent felt blood soaking his shirt, warm, sticky. His vision narrowed. But rage, pure, protective, burned brighter than pain. He shifted Aaliyah behind him, reached under his jacket. The compact pistol was always there, habit, necessity. He fired twice, controlled, precise. The man in the passenger seat jerked back. The driver swerved. The SUV accelerated, disappearing around the bend. Silence fell, heavy ringing. Vincent slumped against the bench. Blood pooled beneath him. His left arm hung useless. Breathing came in shallow gasps. Aaliyah wailed, small hands clutching his shirt. Daddy, Daddy hurt. The word pierced him deeper than any bullet. Renee reached him, hands pressing against the wound on his side. Her fingers came away red. Vincent, oh God, hold on. He looked at her, vision blurring. Get them. Safe. Go back. To the house. Renee shook her head, tears streaming. No. No. You're not leaving us. Malik crawled over, face pale. He's bleeding. A lot. Zoe whimpered beside him. Vincent tried to speak, voice weak. Guards. Coming. Take them. Aaliyah pressed her small body against his chest cheek to his shirt, sobbing. Then instinctively, impossibly, she began to hum. A simple lullaby Renee sang every night. Soft, shaky. Her tiny hand patted his chest once, twice, as though she could soothe the pain away. Vincent felt its warmth spreading from that small touch. Not enough to stop the bleeding. Enough to anchor him. The world narrowed to her voice. To her hand. To the weight of her trust. Renee kept pressure on the wound, hands shaking violently. Stay with us. Please. Stay. Vincent lifted his good arm, slowly wrapped it around Aaliyah. Held her close. Felt her heartbeat against his fast, frightened alive. Sirens wailed in the distance, guards calling for help, ambulances responding. Vincent's vision dimmed. Memories flickered his sister's face before the shot, Renee's exhausted smile when Zoe first breathed easier, Malik's arms around his neck, Aaliyah's forehead against his. He whispered, barely audible, "I'm sorry. For everything. Before." Renee leaned closer, forehead against his. "Don't. Just stay. We need you." Aaliyah's humming continued, small, stubborn, determined. She pressed her cheek harder against his chest as though she could keep his heart beating through sheer will. The pain receded, replaced by something warmer, deeper. A father's love, fierce, sacrificial, eternal. Vincent closed his eyes. In the ambulance, lights flashing, sirens screaming, Aaliyah refused to let go. Paramedics tried to move her. She clung tighter, sobbing, humming, refusing to be separated. Renee held her hand. Malik and Zoe sat beside them, silent, wide-eyed. The doctors later said it was impossible to quantify the way the child's presence stabilized. His vitals slowed the blood loss, kept his heart rhythm from crashing. They called it coincidence. Vincent knew better. Her voice, her touch, her refusal to let him go. She had saved him not with medicine, not with power, with innocence, with love so pure it refused to accept loss. When Vincent woke in the hospital room, bandaged, weak, alive, the first thing he saw was Aaliyah curled against his side on the narrow bed. Her small hand rested over his heart. She slept exhausted, tear-streaked, but peaceful. Renee sat in the chair beside them, eyes red but shining. She leaned forward, whispered, "She wouldn't leave you, not for a second." Vincent looked down at his daughter, and felt the last wall inside him crumble. Tears slipped from the corners of his eyes, silent, unashamed. He lifted his good hand slowly, stroked Aaliyah's soft curls. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm here." Renee reached across, covered his hand with hers. In that quiet hospital room, Beep's steady dawn light creeping through blinds, the near-death sacrifice became something more, the deepest healing. A father brought back from the edge by the child he had never known he needed, a child who refused to let him go, and a family forged in blood, pain, and unbreakable love that would never be broken again. The hospital discharged Vincent at dawn against medical advice, but no doctor argued with a man who signed the papers with a hand still trembling from blood loss. His left shoulder was bandaged thickly beneath a fresh black shirt. His side ached with every breath. He refused the wheelchair. He walked out under his own power, Aaliyah clinging to his neck, like a small koala, refusing to be carried by anyone else. Renee walked beside him, silent eyes, shadowed with worry that had not left since the shooting. Malik held Zoe's hand tightly. Jamal toddled between them, clutching Vincent's pant leg every few steps. The drive home was quiet. No one spoke of the ambush. No one needed to. The scars, visible and invisible, were fresh enough to bleed at the slightest pressure. Back at the mansion, Vincent did not rest. He retreated to the study, door closed, lights low, and made 3 calls. The first to Jason, gather everything. Every financial trail, every property record, every offshore account linked to Rossi's crew. "I want proof they poisoned the water lines in Brightmoor last summer. The ones that left families boiling tap water for weeks. Full documentation. No copies left anywhere traceable." The second to a contact in the city water department. Confirm the testing logs. Dates. Chemical levels. Names on the payroll who signed off. The third to a trusted journalist at the Detroit Free Press. "You'll get an anonymous package tomorrow. Verify it. Then run it. Front page. No hesitation. By 4:18 p.m. The package was prepared. Encrypted. Drive, printed reports, sworn affidavits from whistleblowers. Vincent had quietly protected for years. He handed it to Jason in the garage. "Deliver it tonight. No trace." Jason nodded once. And Rossi, Vincent's voice was steel. "He meets me. Tonight. Neutral ground. The old warehouse on Jefferson, empty since the layoffs. Alone. No guns. No backup. Just him and me." Jason hesitated the first time Vincent had ever seen it. "Boss, you're still bleeding through the bandages." Vincent met his eyes. "I know." The warehouse stood dark and cavernous on the edge of the river, rusted beams, broken windows, letting in slivers of sodium streetlight. Vincent arrived first, alone, as promised. He stood in the center of the empty floor, coat open over the bandages, hands loose at his sides. Rossi arrived 12 minutes later. Older than Vincent, remembered silver at the temples, eyes colder than the Detroit wind. He walked in slowly, cane tapping concrete, flanked by no one. The door clanged shut behind him. "Moretti," Rossi said, voice flat. "You look like hell." Vincent did not smile. "You sent men to shoot at children." Rossi shrugged, small, dismissive. "Business. You crossed a line. I reminded you where the lines are." Vincent stepped forward, slow, deliberate. "The line ends tonight." Rossi's eyes narrowed. "You think you can threaten me? In my city?" Vincent reached into his coat slowly, pulled out a single printed sheet, held it up. Rossi's face changed fractionally at first, then completely. The document: water quality reports from Brightmoor, July 2024. Lead levels 7 times the federal limit. Internal memos linking Rossi's waste-hauling subsidiary to illegal dumping. Signatures, dates, proof. Vincent spoke quietly. "This goes public tomorrow morning. Every news outlet, every regulatory board, every family in Brightmoor who boiled water for their kids because your people cut corners. They'll know who poisoned them. They'll know why their children got sick. They'll know who profited." Rossi's cane trembled once. "You wouldn't. I already did." Silence stretched thick, lethal. Rossi's voice dropped. "You release that, you release war. Not just between us. The whole city. Families will turn. Businesses will collapse. You'll burn with me." Vincent took another step, close enough to see the vein pulsing at Rossi's temple. "I don't care," he said. "You came after my family. You sent bullets toward a 2-year-old girl, toward her mother, toward children who've already lost too much. If burning everything keeps them safe, if it means they never have to run again, then let it burn." Rossi stared at him, long searching. Saw something in Vincent's eyes he had never seen before, not anger, not calculation, but absolute willingness. Willingness to lose power, money, reputation, everything for 4 small lives, and the woman who carried them through hell. Rossi exhaled, slow, defeated. "You've changed." Vincent did not deny it. "Yes." Rossi looked down at the paper, then back up. "Call off the story." Vincent shook his head. "It's done." Rossi's shoulders sagged fractionally. "Then what do you want?" Vincent spoke without hesitation. "You walk away. You pull every man, every eye, every threat from my family. You disappear from their lives. Forever. Or this story runs and I make sure every family in Detroit knows exactly who to blame when their water turns brown again." Rossi stood motionless. Then slowly he nodded once. "Done." He turned, walked toward the door, paused. "This isn't forgiveness," he said. "It's survival." Vincent watched him go. The door clanged shut. Silence returned, heavier now. Vincent stood alone in the vast, empty space. Blood seeped through the bandage on his side, slow, steady. Pain throbbed with every heartbeat, but the weight inside his chest, the constant gnawing fear for them, lifted. Just a little. He walked out into the night, slow, unsteady. The guards waited by the car. He waved them off. He needed to walk. The streets were quiet. Cold wind cut through his coat. He felt every step, sharp, grounding. When he reached the mansion gates, the lights were on in the windows, warm golden. He saw silhouettes: Renee at the kitchen island, stirring something on the stove. Malik reading to Zoe on the couch. The twins asleep upstairs. He stood outside the gate, watching. Tears came then, silent, unstoppable. Not from pain, from relief so profound it hurt. He had almost lost them. He had almost lost himself. But he had chosen, and the choice had saved them all. He pushed the gate open, walked up the drive. Renee met him at the door, eyes wide, searching his face. "You're bleeding again," she whispered. Vincent smiled, small, tired, real. "It's okay." She stepped forward, wrapped her arms around him, careful of the bandages. He held her tight, fierce breathing and the scent of her hair, the faint trace of baby shampoo and home. The children appeared behind her, Malik first, then Zoe, then Aaliyah, toddling forward with arms up. Vincent knelt slowly, painfully. Aaliyah climbed into his lap. Malik stepped close, hesitant, then leaned against his side. Zoe slipped her small hand into his. Renee knelt with them. In the open doorway, light spilling onto the cold driveway, they held each other. No words, no promises, just quiet, condensed stillness, and the knowledge, deep, unshakable, that whatever came next, they would face it together. A father who had sacrificed everything. A mother who had survived impossible odds. 4 children who had taught them both how to love again. The wind blew cold, relentless, but inside the circle of their arms it could not touch them. Not anymore. October 25th, 2025. Dawn broke over Grosse Pointe shores in pale, hesitant streaks of gold, and rose the first clean light after days of shadow. Inside the mansion, the air felt lighter, as though the building itself had exhaled. Vincent Moretti sat on the wide leather sofa in the living room, still bandaged beneath a loose gray sweater, stitches pulling with every careful movement. He had refused stronger pain medication. He wanted to feel everything today, every ache, every breath, every heartbeat that proved he was still here. Renee stood at the kitchen island, sleeves rolled up, stirring a simple pot of oatmeal on the stove. Her hands no longer shook. The thinness of her wrists, the faint hollows beneath her cheekbones, the marks of too many nights without enough food, too many winters without heat were still visible, but they no longer defined her. She moved with quiet purpose, portioning oatmeal into 5 mismatched bowls she had found in a lower cabinet, refusing the fine china Vincent had once used only for rare guests. The children were awake early. Aaliyah toddled across the rug, First Bear dragging behind her straight to Vincent. She climbed onto his lap without asking, small knees digging into his thighs, small arms wrapping around his neck. "Daddy okay?" she asked, patting his cheek with serious concentration. Vincent pressed his lips to her forehead. "Daddy's okay, little one." Jamal followed quieter, climbing up beside his twin. Malik and Zoe came last, Malik walking with shoulders straighter than yesterday, Zoe clutching her rabbit but no longer hiding half her face behind it. Renee carried the tray over 5 bowls, 5 spoons, a small pitcher of milk. She set it on the low table. Then she sat on the floor in front of them, cross-legged, as though the expensive sofa still felt too grand. Vincent looked at each face, 4 children who had changed the axis of his world. One woman who had carried them through impossible darkness with nothing but her bare hands and unbreakable heart. He cleared his throat, voice rough from disuse and emotion. "I have something to say." They all went still. Vincent reached into the pocket of his sweater, removed 4 small envelopes, simple white paper, each sealed with a single initial written in his careful hand. He handed one to each child. Aaliyah tore hers open first inside a single sheet of paper. A legal document. Adoption papers. Her name beside his. Permanent. Irrevocable. She looked up, eyes wide. "What this mean?" Vincent swallowed. "It means you're my daughter. In every way that matters. In every way the law can make true. You, Jamal, Malik, Zoe, you're all mine now. If you want it. If your mom says yes." Renee's hand flew to her mouth. Tears spilled instantly, silent shining. She looked at the papers. Vincent slid across the table toward her. Full guardianship transfer. Joint custody. A future where no landlord could ever bang on their door again. Where no cold wind could ever steal their sleep. Malik opened his envelope last. His hands shook. When he read the words, his name beside Vincent's, the line that read "Father," he stared at the page for a long time. Then he looked up. "You mean it?" His voice cracked, small, raw. Vincent nodded. "I do." Malik's shoulders began to shake. He dropped the paper, crawled across the rug, and threw himself into Vincent's arms, hard, desperate. Aaliyah and Jamal followed. Zoe hesitated, then climbed up, too rabbit forgotten on the floor. Vincent held them all, 4 arms straining, heart splitting open wider than he thought possible. Tears ran down his face, hot, unashamed. He had spent 23 years believing love was weakness. Now he understood love was the only strength that mattered. Renee knelt beside them. She placed her hand over Vincent's where it rested on Malik's back. "I never thought," she whispered. "I never thought anyone would choose us. Not like this. Not forever." Vincent looked at her, really looked. Saw the woman who had survived on scraps and courage, who had sung lullabies in freezing rooms, who had carried 4 small lives when the world offered nothing but wind and closed doors. "I choose you," he said. "Every day, every hour. Not because I have to, because I want to, because you taught me what family means." Renee's tears fell faster. She leaned forward, forehead resting against his. "We're safe," she breathed. "We're really safe." Vincent wrapped one arm around her, too careful of the stitches, careful of everything fragile and precious. The 5 children and 2 adults stayed like that, kneeling, holding, breathing together, while morning light poured across the rug and warmed the room. Outside, the world continued deals, threats, power plays. But inside these walls, something new had taken root. A family. Not born of blood alone, but of choice. Of sacrifice. Of love that refused to see skin color, refused to measure wealth or poverty, refused to let the past dictate the future. Vincent lifted his head. Looked at each face, wet cheeks, shining eyes, small hands clutching his sweater. "I promise," he said quietly, "I will spend every day earning this. Being the father you deserve. Being the man you can trust." Malik wiped his face. "You already are." Aaliyah patted Vincent's cheek again. "Daddy, stay." Vincent smiled, small, real, aching with gratitude. Daddy stays. Later that evening, after baths, after stories, after tucking 4 small bodies into beds lined with clean sheets, Vincent and Renee stood on the balcony overlooking the dark river. The city lights glittered far away, distant and unimportant. Renee spoke first, voice soft. I used to think love was something for other people. People with money. People with safety. I thought poverty made me invisible. Vincent turned to her. You were never invisible. Not to me. Renee looked up, eyes shining. I believe you now. He reached out slowly, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. Love doesn't see skin. It doesn't count dollars. It sees heart. And yours is the strongest I've ever known. Renee stepped closer, rested her head against his good shoulder. They stood in silence, watching the river carry the last light away. And in that quiet, condensed stillness, Vincent understood the deepest truth. Wealth could buy silence, power could buy fear, but only love could heal what had been broken for so long. This story, full of knowledge, rich with knowledge, overflowing with knowledge, carrying knowledge in every heartbeat and built upon knowledge, reminds us that the greatest lesson is compassion. The truest lesson is protection, the most enduring. Lesson is choosing family every single day, the most powerful. Lesson is seeing beyond surface differences, and the most beautiful lesson is that love conquers every divide. Through every trial, the real education lies in kindness. The real education blooms in forgiveness. The real education grows in sacrifice. The real education teaches us to hold on, and the real education shows us that no one is ever truly lost when someone chooses to see them. To everyone watching this video, may you be blessed with good health, a joyful life filled with warmth and daily peace that settles deep into your soul. If this story touched you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another heartfelt journey. We post new stories every day, stories that remind us what really matters. Tell me in the comments, how did this story make you feel? Did it remind you of something in your own life? Share whatever rises in your heart. I read every word, and I listen to every emotion you pour out. Thank you for being here. I'll see you again in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.